Hi everyone, and thank you for joining me today. My name is Ignacio Andreu, and I'm a Senior Manager of Engineering at Vanta. Vanta is the lead AI trust management platform. It helps organizations automate compliance, manage risk, and demonstrate trust. My team is responsible for implementing AI-powered solutions into the Vanta platform to help our users be more efficient and productive. As you can imagine, Agentic AI is a big part of that work. When I tell people I work in AI, I get mixed reactions. There's excitement around the potential of AI, but also some fear of the unknown and concerns about how to create the proper guardrails around AI to make sure it works the way it is intended when it doesn't make mistakes. I personally like to focus on the excitement. I believe Agentic AI holds a massive potential to increase our productivity and efficiency, but if it doesn't work properly, it could actually end up wasting our customers' time or even worse, destroying valuable work. Today, I'm excited to talk to you about how to successfully ship Agentic AI experiences with confidence and preventing AI implementations to go off the rails based on our experience here at Vanta. Before we dive into some really tactical advice, let's talk about why this matters. There are a variety of well-known issues and risks surrounding AI and the use of LLMs. This includes things like hallucinations and factual inaccuracy, bias, misuse and malicious use by bad actors, permissioning issues, context poisoning, prompt injections, and model drift. The OWASP Top 10 list is a fantastic resource. It captures and addresses a lot of the latest security issues of AI applications. In the latest edition of the list, the community dug into a number of new and updated risks. The new list includes unbounded consumption, which expands on what was previously denial of service, to include risk around resource management and unexpected costs. This is a pressing issue in LLM deployments, especially in large-scale deployments. OWASP also highlights risks around system prompt leakage. This is about the privacy and protection of information we include in prompts. Previously, companies assumed that prompts were securely isolated, but there have been so many recent incidents that prove that this is simply not the case. Another big piece of the latest OWASP list is the autonomy of LLMs. This is particularly relevant alongside the increased usage of agentic architectures. With LLM acting as agents, unchecked permissions can lead to unintended or risky actions. To put these risks in context, I'm sure that we have all heard horror stories about things like bias and hallucinations specifically. It is not uncommon to see headlines like this, which talk about the potential for bias impacting the integrity of our medical care, who gets hired for certain jobs, and how much they get paid. These concerns are certainly valid. They're real issues that can have a huge impact on people's lives. And with agentic AI specifically, these risks can compound. As agentic AI becomes more common, it is important to remember that an agent is essentially multiple LLM executions and tool calls. Therefore, if an agent gets off track because one of the issues I talked about previously, like bias, hallucinations, or model drift, or if it uses the wrong tool or takes an incorrect action, things get very bad very quickly. Essentially, issues compound with each iteration. When you think about this compounding impact, you can see why we need to introduce systems to immediately spot, mitigate, and prevent these issues so our agents continue to function in the way that we intend. So how do we begin to tackle this issue? There are 4 key things to focus on when thinking about agentic AI oversight. There are rituals, evals, production guardrails, and access control. If you center your approach to agentic AI oversight around these 4 things, you can mitigate a lot of risks that AI could potentially introduce in your system and workflows. Let's dive into each one of these 4 things in more detail. First up, rituals. Think of rituals like good habits. They're repeatable check-ins that help keep your agentic AI models on track. When building an agentic AI, these rituals are meant to support autonomy, accountability, and continual improvement. Specifically, rituals are most effective when they are structured to help us reflect on performance, adjust our strategies or actions, and align with high-level objectives. There are a few rituals that help in this process. In my opinion, one key ritual is to look at your data on a daily basis to get a sense of whether your agent is excelling and whether it is failing. In doing so, you will want to do things like annotate your data to mark whether the outcome matched the expectations, review if the response was stylistically well represented, and review whether the agent called the right tools and other dimensions that reflect on what you really care about. For these data reviews, it is important to be clear about ownership and have specific action items that should follow up each review to ensure that you are doing something valuable with the information that you collected. In addition to a daily review ritual, you might also have weekly evaluations to capture trends and understand how the quality is evolving, or a monthly check-in to evaluate additional criteria. Your agentic AI workflows are only as strong as the rituals you build to support them. So here are some tips when thinking about rituals to perform with your team. First, anchor your rituals in quality. You need to focus on evaluating the quality of your agentic AI outputs. A helpful tip here is to force yourself to annotate every piece of data that you review. You're already putting in the work, so make sure that you capture your thoughts. When you start, think about annotating dimensions that are specific to quality analysis. You don't have to go crazy with multiple annotations early on. You can iterate as time goes on. Second, make sure that your reviews are happening regularly. For example, every day at 10 a.m., the team is going to conduct their daily data review, checking each one of the new interactions since last time. It might sound silly, but putting it in the calendar and inviting others keeps us accountable and ensures that we repeat the ritual on a consistent cadence. Repetition is also key because it helps you understand what works and what doesn't work in your reviews. I usually say that you have to have between 10 and 20 review sessions to understand exactly how you want to run them, what type of annotations are useful, how to change the tooling around, and what are good fast follow-ups versus medium-term priorities. The next tip is to collect review information in one central place for easy access. At Vanta, we use Streamlit on top of our data warehouse, and we tailor the UI to the data. But I recommend everyone to start simple. For most basic annotations and small sets of data, spreadsheets work great. Don't spend too much time trying to find the perfect tool for your annotations. Finally, do your data analysis as a team. Involve engineers, product managers, designers, and subject matter experts, so everyone can understand the current state of data quality and any gap the agent has. So rituals are great, but rituals are just the beginning to maintain AI oversight because they don't necessarily scale. You need to transform your learnings into evals to create a true safety net that gives you a sense of how your agent is performing as you change prompts, models, and other components for your agents. And that is our next focal point in this talk, evals. With LLMs, evals are a standard way we assess an AI system performance to ensure it meets a specific quality, tone, safety, bias, and other criteria. I like to compare them to unit tests when writing code. It is a quality check to determine if the model is accurate, safe, and aligned with the user needs. Evals also enable continuous performance tracking, so you can detect drift and regressions over time. So, a few different types of evals. You might create a task-specific eval. This is an evaluation that focuses, as the name suggests, on assessing an AI agent's performance on a particular task. This is all about evaluating the input-output relationship of a specific task. These types of evals look at the agent's ability to produce the desired outcome, tone, content, action, as the result of the given input. One of the reasons this is helpful is because it can be really daunting to evaluate a whole agent, depending on how complicated it is. So it often makes sense to test smaller parts of the agent, just like the unit test I mentioned before. For example, you may want to look at very specific things like, did these inputs make the agent call these tools? Do the inputs produce these outputs? There are also specialist manual evals like adversarial or reteaming evals. These test the resilience and security of your model against bad inputs or simulated bad actors. And when we are doing agent evals, we need to keep the best practices in mind. The first one is to test the steps, not just the outputs. The reason this is so important is because you don't just want to know what the agentic AI produces a correct answer. You want to evaluate some of its key steps as well. For instance, if you have a planning step, you probably want to evaluate it. Ask, did the agent set the appropriate goals? Also look at the execution. Did the agent follow the execution of the plan? Another tip is to use LLMs to evaluate our agents. This is called LLM as a judge. You can actually use smaller models or ML models to give feedback and decide what to do next with the information collected. When I was at Google Search, we did this a lot. We used small LLMs to understand if a response was grounded and safe. Another good tip is that eval datasets need to be representative of production. If our data in the evals doesn't have a good production coverage, you risk of overfitting your new changes to your eval data, but not to what the users will encounter when using the agent. By having an eval dataset that is representative of production, you can evolve your prompt and try different foundational models quicker. You will also need to extend your evals as you give your agent new powers or expand to cover new use cases. That will help you understand how those new use cases are performing. Finally, it is also important to check your tool selection. Is the agent calling the right tools for the task at hand? And if a system involves multiple agents, make sure that your agent delegation is correct. At this point, we have talked about rituals and we have talked about evals. Now it is time to move on to the third key factor of agentic AI oversight, and that is production guardrails. Production guardrails are another thing that act as feedback to your agent. While evals typically occur as the pre-post deployment phase, guardrails monitor bad behavior at runtime and control what the agent is actually allowed to do. In general, guardrails exist to prevent harmful or unintended behaviors, ensure compliance, security, and reliability, and support trust and auditability in production. They act as feedback to the agent and about what to do next, and if the agent is thinking correctly about the right next step. I hear something recently from Brett Taylor at CRII. If an LLM can be right 90% of the time, and a guardrail can be right 90% of the time, we can now create much more accurate systems by combining them. Here are two examples of production guardrails: action constraints and runtime safeguards. Action constraints essentially outline what the agent is and is not allowed to do. There are a set of rules for your agent. You might not want your agent to respond to specific topics or give certain advice. Runtime safeguards are limits around the resource usage or duration of tasks to prevent your agent from just going in circles on a certain task. When you're making your own production guardrails, consider these tips. First, plus for human intervention, especially for actions that are hard to revert, like sending an email, changing values in the database, etc. This is called human in the loop. One way to do this is to only allow certain tool calls after we have presented the information to the user and the user has agreed to proceed. Multiple frameworks allow you to define tool calls in a way so the LLM can't call them directly. Human in the loop approval for high-risk actions is actually one of the key risk mitigation themes in the OWASP Top 10 paper I mentioned earlier. You can check the paper for a deeper dive and additional tips. Another thing you want to do is leverage existing tools. You don't need to build from scratch to put your production guardrails in place. Use things like OpenAI's function calling schemas for input and output validation. This can be really helpful and prevent you from having to reinvent the wheel. When you're building your production guardrails, you will also want to iterate based on real agent behavior. And finally, build capabilities to easily revert operations. This last one is really helpful in case something goes wrong. If you can easily revert back, you can essentially erase any issues that pop up and go back to the state before the issue happened. The last element of agentic AI oversight that we're going to talk about today is access control. Access control refers to permissions. It is how we group and provision users who can access agentic workflows. When we think about access, we need to think about who or what can access the system, which parts of the system they can get to, and under what conditions they can make do so. Access control is important because you don't want someone to be accessing information via an agent that they wouldn't otherwise be able to get to. When building agentic workflows, you could unintentionally go against some of the access controls built into your existing system. That is not something that we want to do. So what is the best way to approach access control? The first thing is to calibrate access control with your software controls. An easy mistake to make is to assume that every user should have the same access and privileges in a system. But in reality, this is not practical and safe to give all users the same level of access, especially in enterprise applications. Instead, bake permissions into the tools given to the agent instead of letting the agent decide. Give users the same access to your agent that you will give them within your software, versus starting from scratch with custom permissions to the agent itself. You will also want to ensure human control over critical access points. This is essential for anyone building agentic workflows. You must keep a human in the loop to maintain certain security standards, as we mentioned before. Finally, audit everything, and audit often. Make sure that you log every access, action, and output to track who is performing the different actions, specifically when those require privileged access. You must also frequently review access controls to mitigate risk. And to take things a step further, you can try to do something similar to a pen test. Try escalating permissions in various ways to find and close any loopholes that you could introduce an additional risk. So with that, we have covered the 4 most important things to consider to build high-quality, trustworthy AI agents. Again, these are rituals, evals, production guardrails, and access control. Focusing on these 4 areas will give you a solid foundation to control and optimize your use of agents. And as an agentic AI becomes integrated into more business-critical workflows, this becomes even more important. You also need to think about scaling these efforts over time. A few ways you can do that include using LLMs as a classifier to prioritize what data you need to look at, consistently identifying new use cases that should be represented in your evals, understanding drifts between production data and your eval datasets, and removing unnecessary categories of data from your reviews as you tweak your evals. While these are mainly human-driven tasks today, the future holds many possibilities, including the idea of agents reviewing agents, where one AI agent is tasked with auditing, critiquing, or approving the behavior of another agent. This cuts out time-sensitive manual labor and will allow us to innovate even more quickly. If we can master the basics of creating rituals, evals, guardrails, and nailing access control, we'll get one step closer to that reality. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope this session was helpful. I wish you the best of luck in building with Agentic AI moving forward.